Hello, welcome everybody. I am Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, and this is Scott the Flute Billick from the Winnipeg Sun. Here's the deal. Here's the ground rules, everyone. I know some of you were watching us over on Illegal Curve. Ken has a job at Sportsnet. He's writing, doing those things right now, but I'm not letting him off that easily, Scott. I've told him he's got a half hour to get here, or this becomes the Shawnee and Scotty show. That's how it's going to go. It's the playoffs. You got to bring your A game.
I'll get a sign made.
Yeah, exactly. So you're here. We were spending some time over on Illegal Curve. I'm sure there's going to be some people jumping over. But let's start it off for the people who haven't seen us talking. I'd like to start these shows off just to kind of get your overarching themes of what you thought of the game. What'd you take away from that one, Scotty?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the win. Is that sound coming off of your computer or mine?
I must be coming off of mine, or I don't know. I'm not hearing anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, to me, the game was it was a good Jets game in terms of the fact that they played a certain style of game that helped them beat the Edmonton Oilers. And you talked about a little bit, and so I'm kind of stealing a bit of your thunder here. But like the top line played a certain defensive style of game. And it was effective against Connor McDavid. I will, I know people think that I'm negative. I'm not going to say that they played a great game because, I mean, if you look at the shot attempts against, it was nearly a 2-to-1 ratio for Edmonton. If you look at the scoring chances against, it was exactly 2-to-1. I believe it was 30-15. The difference in this game, obviously, Connor Hellebuyck, right? I mean, he makes 30 somewhat saves. I want to say I had it pulled up here. He had 33 to 32 saves on 33 shots. And to me, he was big and boring. And when Connor Hellebuyck, and I said this on your preview show yesterday, when Connor Hellebuyck is big and boring, that's when he wins Vezina trophies, right? And we saw that last year quite a bit. Does he make remarkable saves at times? Yes. But at the same time, a lot of times those remarkable saves would look a lot more remarkable if he didn't have perfect positioning. And I thought tonight his game was just on. I mean, the goal itself against, he even got a piece of that, right? It squeezes underneath his, in between his armpit essentially and goes in. So, to me, I thought the Jets played a game that's good enough to win. I think they need to tighten up some things going forward to win a series. But you've already kind of done what you set out to do. And I think winning game one was huge for the Jets. They needed to prove, and not just to the fans or anybody else, they needed to prove to themselves that they could beat Edmonton after losing 6 straight to them, to kind of close out the season, right? So, to me, I just think they did the job that they needed to do, and I think there's improvements. Paul and Maurice alluded to that. I also think they have to now prepare for what Dave Tippett and the Oilers are going to bring at them in game 2. And I don't believe that Connor McDavid will just be held to 2 shots again. I think, and not shots in the first 2 periods of the game. I think, the Jets are going to have to adjust some of the things that they did. And but at the same time, it doesn't, the analytics have never really been good for the Jets this season. When they win, oftentimes they've been outshot and outchanced and all those things, and they still win games. This is sort of their MO in terms of how they win games, in terms of the analytics. Nobody's going to expect them to be an analytical darling. That's not who they are, but they can win games outside of that. What they need to do is find a way to win 4 games, or now 3, in the next 6 to move out of this series. And, the biggest thing that they have now is that first game in a split on the road against Edmonton.
As we welcome in Ken Wiebe here from Sportsnet. Ken Wiebe just finished writing his piece. Yeah, everyone should go check that out. It's going to be good stuff because it's always good stuff. Ken, I was going to have a nice big reveal for you, and then I forgot you've got the capability to let yourself in the show. I was going to try and lock you out. Or I was going to kick you out again for dramatic effect, but it didn't work out. How's your night going,
You
Ken?
go ahead.
Your run's over, Kenney. It's the Shawnee and Scotty show.
That's what I said. I laid the rules down. I said he's got a half hour to get here. Change the
Wally
logo
Pip,
on the wall.
Wally Pip, Wally Pip it up, folks. No problem. This is what happens when I'm writing game 1 and Sean Sean's wrong about the score. He wants to keep me out of the room here. Hey, is that what it is? Is that what it is?
Oh, see, I'm glad I finally goaded you into rubbing it in.
You did. It's true.
You're
it's
usually
true.
such a good winner. You're usually like, oh, shucks. But no,
You'll never hear the end of it.
I won the season series against Kenney in our prediction game, and I stuck it to him every time I had the opportunity to do it. And Ken was too classy, and now I finally dragged him down to my level, and I love every minute of it.
Yeah.
Ken,
I bit my tongue. Hang on a second. I bit my tongue during the pregame show. I was going to say I loved going into the playoffs against guys like you that were running their mouths all year long, and then when the playoffs came, you had to keep it a little quieter.
I'll tell you something. In all actuality, when I played sports, I was never the guy who ran my mouth. I know that. I'm just teasing. But you bring it out in me, Kenney. I love to get you going. I absolutely love to get you going. Kenney,
hang on. You're the last person in Manitoba that I haven't agitated on the ice because we never were on the ice together. So it's good. I got to get you back now on the airwaves.
Yeah, that's too bad. I was the quiet one on the ice. I'm the loud one away from it. You were the loud one on the ice. Now you're the quiet one away from it. Ken, give us an idea of what you saw in that game and how it broke down for you.
Yeah, I think Scott touched on a lot of things there for sure. I mean, I don't think that's the Jets' perfect template necessarily, but I mean, I would say this. I mean, I do think they were pretty solid for the most part. Is my audio okay for you? Yeah, okay, good. Again, Hellebuyck, excellent. We knew that had to be the case. Yeah, I mean, he was solid. I mean, he didn't have to make he was very good, but it wasn't one of these, 40, 50 save games. However, he was very good. He was, very stable in the crease. The biggest thing for me, guys, is how he fought through traffic. Again, I brought this up with Blake Wheeler, with Paul Maurice in the pregame. The battle around the blue ice. The Jets didn't win that battle today necessarily. Yes, they got the tip-in goal for the game winner. Yes, for sure. Good job by Toninato to get to the net. But the Oilers were living in that paint again. They had a couple of incredibly dangerous tips, and they made life difficult for Connor Hellebuyck in that crease today. Again, he made it look big and boring, but he often makes excellent saves look routine. So for me, I thought Hellebuyck was obviously, critical to the Jets' success. We knew that in order for the Jets to maybe even ensure, Scott, as you mentioned, ensuring a split now, no matter what happens in Game 2, Hellebuyck was going to need to steal one of those games. This, I think, would qualify. And again, anytime the Jets get goals from players who have not scored an NHL goal during the year, both of whom had serious COVID issues, one missing 11 games, and Toninato basically not even really revealing how serious they thought it was at one point. They get 2 goals from those type of players. I mean, Poolman hadn't scored since March 9th of 2020, like just before the break. Guys, this is a Clear Lake Golf Course shirt. It's not a Riders shirt. Although I did go to the University of Regina. This is my University of Regina green color, but it's a Clear Lake Golf Course shirt, so no rattling necessary there.
Too. Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. I don't mind. Anyways, humongous contributions from unlikely sources, including 2 players who were essentially the last players inserted into the lineup for Game 1. Once again, it's a matter of, we don't always have to necessarily agree, but usually the coaches have a reason for putting these players in, even if some people think it's a head-scratching situation. Paul Maurice not taking any of the credit when I asked him if it was a hunch. He basically said it was the assistant coaches that convinced him that Dominic Toninato would be ready for this role. Scott, we were talking about this a lot about Logan Stanley. Logan Stanley was in a 3-man platoon at a time when it looked like he had won the job already. Instead of getting frustrated by that, he went out and played great at the end of the year, added that physical component that was missing, and that's exactly what he brought to the table today, along with his exiting capabilities and getting that shot through. I mean, we saw on social media a lot, well, why does Stanley always hammer the puck? Oh, he misses the net, or that's not a dangerous shot. Well, guess what? For all of the attempts that he had this year, this time he found a stick, and it delivered the most important goal of the entire season for the Winnipeg Jets. So, again, we've talked about Logan Stanley a lot, but, man, what a great start. What a great start for him, and what a reward for him after what he had to endure late in the season.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you were talking about, Ken, and I'm gonna totally poke a hole in the theory that I'm just about to give, because I can think of a ton of times this year that Connor Hellebuyck was scored on by tips in front of the net. I mean, how many times did it happen just in games against Ottawa alone? But don't you think that, like, the idea of big and boring, and when he's playing great, Scott brought this up on our playoff preview show. He talked about it earlier today about Connor Hellebuyck when he's playing big and boring. To me, his big and boring style, I think, works very effectively against tipped shots when he's on his game. Isn't it a situation where even though the Jets were getting to the front of the net, or excuse me, the Oilers, like you said, were getting to the blue paint and were getting in tight? I had a conversation with Hellebuyck last year when he won the Vezina Trophy about he didn't mind those in tight shots that everyone thought were super dangerous shots because he's so big and boring. It's hard to get it past him, and as long as there's back pressure and the guys have to get rid of the puck and they don't have a lot of time, he liked stopping those kind of shots. So I wonder if the Oilers going to that dirty net front kind of style actually works against them, because I would argue it's kind of the dynamic scoring against the Oilers that really gave Connor Hellebuyck trouble this year.
Yeah, the one thing though, Scott, I'll let you get in here right away, but the one thing that we also saw on the Oilers' power play is where we really saw the screens. Like Chason for surely had several screens this year. I don't think it's necessary. No, Oilers are still going to go to the net, Sean, but you're right. When Hellebuyck is fighting through those screens and finding those pucks, and again, it's his positioning. I believe it was the Nugent Hopkins, the kind of the one-handed tip that kind of went through the defenseman's legs. I'm not sure Hellebuyck even really saw it, but he found a way to square up, and it limited the rebound. I just thought he was excellent, and that was a huge thing for this hockey game. And again, whether it's a save, the Tyson Barrie clapper that, hits the top of the paddle and goes over. I mean, he looked like he did in those Leafs games that mattered, you guys. I mean, he just looked like he was confident, and it was going to take basically a perfect shot to beat him. And that's basically what we saw today.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it. I thought, and first of all, videos and Reddit, I said Oilers in 6, just so you know. So, that ship hasn't sailed yet. But anyways, no, I think some of the tip shots that have beat Connor Hellebuyck this year have been more of kind of like the high slot or mid slot type of tips. I think, to Sean's point, the in close tips, the those ones, because big and boring. I hate using these cliches, but he's just positionally sound, and the guy's 6'5" and wide. I mean, he's not a wide guy when you see him, but his equipment he's a big dude in the net, right? And so I think when it's in tight, it just because of his positioning, it hits off him. And like Sean said, it drops. And as long as somebody clears that puck, or if Hellebuyck can smother it himself, then there it happens. I think the biggest problem for Hellebuyck in some of these earlier games, especially during the drought that they went through, their losing streak, was some of these tip shots were coming in from the higher slot areas. And those are the ones that seem to figure out a way past him. I don't know why he was unable to get to those. He also wasn't playing his best at that time. Perhaps he just wasn't seeing it at his best. But yeah, and then just on one thing on Logan Stanley, I think Logan Stanley has evolved into a player. We saw it. I think we've all seen this evolution of Logan Stanley this year. First of all, it was take the shot, take the shot, take the shot, take the shot. It didn't matter, right? If he missed wide, it wouldn't matter. He just wanted to get that puck in, right? Then there was a mid kind of point in his run that he played earlier in the season where it wasn't just shoot the puck. It was like, okay, I have a second here. I've learned that I have a half a second. I can make a move, right? Tonight, I think you saw another evolution, right? Here's a guy that wasn't just trying to put a shot on net. There was some violence behind it, right? That shot was launched off his stick, right? I think that shot was planted from the back of the net either way. I don't know how much the tip would have affected that. Obviously, the tip, you could see Mike Smith. He had no clue where the puck went. But I don't know if he even saw it regardless. That shot was coming. And so maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know.
He was squared up, I think, on it, but it was definitely a great tip. But it had a lot of velocity for sure.
Yeah, I just think that Logan Stanley picked that shot better than he would earlier. And I think that's just an evolution in his game. Plus his defensive play. I mean, there was times in this game where it was just Logan Stanley putting a stick out. It's a long stick. And he's just breaking up plays, right? I mean, there are so many intangible things that he does. They're not intangible. You see them. That's what he does. So I just think that Logan Stanley, there's a lot of confidence in this guy. And it isn't unwavered when he goes out of the lineup. I think we've learned that about Logan Stanley. He goes out of the lineup, and I think this is part of the thing with Logan Stanley throughout his career so far, is that everybody's kind of doubted him, and he knows it. I remember talking to Logan Stanley 2 years ago before the season started, and he told me, he was like, man, I read it. I know what happens. Like, I know what people are saying about me. I don't care. I'm going to essentially say I'm going to make it here one day. And he has now, right? He got that opportunity that he had never had whilst people were telling him he couldn't do it, right? Now he kind of marinated in the AHL, did well, got through an injury a couple seasons, or last season even, and came up, took his opportunity this year. It was taken away from him. Then he was put into the platoon, like Kenney said, ended up winning that battle anyways. I mean, I think this guy just does whatever he needs to do to kind of make it into the lineup. And I think his worth was shown tonight. I think you saw two younger guys in this game kind of take, a step. I think that's the type of thing that you want to see. And Paul Maurice, injuries, whatever it is, he gave Logan Stanley 16 and a half minutes tonight, and it worked out for that team. So I think, I just think that Logan Stanley has earned himself a bit more. I think he played well with Tucker Poolman. I thought the pairing was not bad. I thought Tucker Poolman also, on his goal. I mean, we talked about this, and we've talked about this in the press box. Tucker Poolman has this offensive instinct, but never really, he makes the first move, but doesn't always make that second one to make the goal. I think tonight he does that, right? He makes that first move to break through the two defenders, and then he pots the goal off the rebound. So to me, I think that's just one of those, I don't want to call it an evolution in his game yet. I mean, it just, he took advantage of an opportunity that we don't always see him do. Sometimes he looks lost once he's too far down in the offensive zone. He didn't look that way tonight. He looked like he knew what he was doing down there, and it obviously paid off.
Yeah, and the one thing we talked about too, hold on, Sean, sorry, just what we talked about yesterday, Poolman is a effective third pairing defenseman. He was, as a first pairing defenseman, it hadn't gone well for him, but you put him in the right situation, and like you said, Scott, I mean, the jumping into the rush, that's something he's done effectively, but he hasn't really found the finish, or else it's that last pass that doesn't work out. Here it was, and let's also not forget too, and you brought this up with Scott, with Paul Maurice in the postgame, Nate Thompson makes a very subtle play to start the whole thing, where I think it was James Neal kind of over pursues, Thompson kind of shimmies him to the right, turns, and then fires it across, and then boom, Poolman joins. Poolman zone entry, nice pass, net drive, jams it home. All very simple plays, but little plays being big plays, right? I mean, even Connor Hellebuyck talked about it earlier in the week. Things that don't really seem like much at the time. I mean, that play doesn't happen without Thompson getting the puck across. A young player probably coughs that up or puts it into Neal's shin pads. Instead, he shuffles out of the way, moves it across, and gets things going. And again, we talked about unsung heroes.
And I think that calmed the team down.
Right.
Because right after that goal, I mean, even leading up to that goal, there was a lot of turnovers. The top line was making turnovers, right?
Nate terrible Thompson, start to the period.
Exactly. And I think Nate Thompson, just veteran, whatever you want to call it, he made just the right play at the time. It was just a smart play. I called it just a simple play. Paul Maurice didn't agree with that. Maybe that's not the right wording, but it's just it's a simple board battle win where he got position on James Neal, got it, and then made the outlet pass quick. It wasn't like a play unlike earlier in that period where Mark Scheifele gets the puck at the blue line and fires it across the blue line back to an Oilers player, and then the Oilers are back in the zone. So, I mean, I just think that play by Nate Thompson, he had 2 assists on the night as well, but I think that just calmed down the team, and obviously they score right after that, so that helps. But I just think he made a good play, veteran play there, just to try and make sure that puck was out of the zone and going the other way.
I want to give credit where it's due. Ken, you brought up Poolman, his ability to get down the ice the other day, and the importance of what he could bring to the game. That was a great bit of analysis. As soon as he scored, I thought right off the bat, I thought that was a good job by Kenney to bring that up the other day, because you were handling questions of people thinking he should be booted out of the lineup. That was in our playoff preview show. And when you have analysis that pays off in the first game, you got to point it out. Great job by you on that, Kenney. I love giving shout-outs to people who have good questions. Deep Kingsey asks, let's get into this because it's been asked, what did you guys think of Pionk playing the agitator role and riling McDavid up? Sorry if I'm joining late. It's been talked about. It hasn't been talked about yet. Kenny, what did you think about the way that Pionk was able to get in McDavid's kitchen tonight? I thought he was phenomenal.
He was. He really was. And again, let's also not forget that I think Josh Morrissey handled a good chunk of that role early also in terms of kind of going up against that line. But again, we also saw the nuclear option for quite a bit of time during the game as well. Pionk, it's important. I mean, we know he gets up for this. I mean, let's also not forget that Pionk ate a Bauer sandwich from Connor McDavid earlier in the year when he went to go for that hit at the blue line. Not so subtle play by McDavid to get his stick up in the face area. Neil Pionk definitely remembered that. But, I also let's also be honest here. I love that McDavid stayed in it and was also engaging in the roughhousing at the end of that first period. He's tired of hearing about it, that he's shying away or that he can't get it done in the postseason. I mean, good on him for standing up to Pionk. But again, that's important for the Jets to do because McDavid isn't necessarily a guy who relishes that kind of environment. Whereas some people, you sort of want to let the sleeping dogs lie kind of thing. You don't want to get them engaged because it may elevate their game to another level. I did think the Jets did a great job of all the things we talked about. He did not have, what did he have? He had maybe 2 or 3 dangerous rushes in the contest. During the season, you would see 5 or more per game. Yeah. So definitely Pionk, the hit in the corner that started everything, that was part of it. The Jets do need to get those bumps when they can. I think Wheeler got a hit on McDavid as well. You have to make life difficult for him, and that's what the Jets did tonight. I think great engagement by Pionk. They were smart about it. They were not... they didn't put themselves in a position where it was going to be a 4-on-4, or if they took a, silly rabbit punch and took an extra 2. But if you have a chance to get a body on them, they did. And even too, again, it ended up being uncalled. But, Perreault with a little kind of sneaky elbow on Yamamoto. Yamamoto has been an incredibly effective player in this series. But again, small player. Doesn't necessarily flourish in that type of environment. So if you can frustrate those players, man, it makes an awfully big difference when it comes to that physical side. It's funny. Blake Wheeler's saying the Jets are a physical team. I don't know that necessarily we agree, but they definitely got on the body today, and they did a good job of the players that are physical finishing their checks. And getting on McDavid was an absolutely critical part of that. There were also a couple of hits on Tyson Barrie. We also know he doesn't really love being hit in that regard. It's definitely part of the Jets' game plan. Can they continue to do it over the course of the series? That may determine whether or not they can win those other 3 games in the series.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to. They have to, right? But I think they also, and Jeff Hamilton, I know he's in the chat here. He asked questions after the game about discipline, right? And Paul Maurice feels that there's another level they can kind of get to in terms of their aggressiveness, perhaps without. I never said a sweep. I said you guys can go back.
He got you.
Yes, yeah. I don't usually pull a Kenney there, but anyways.
Good job, Marshall. Good job, Marshall.
Yeah.
Keep going. Make your point. Stay focused.
That's right. I think, Paul Maurice figures this team can take it that aggressiveness to a next level. That was one of his answers to Jeff's question after the game. And I think that's true. I don't know how much exactly they need to do that because I think the next level for the Jets is really, now you're playing really on a knife edge, right? They let a lot of stuff go today. Me and Kenney disagreed during the game about whether Connor McDavid should have got a penalty call for Morrissey there. I think it was.
Lost his footing, in my opinion.
You thought. But I think a lot of times these superstars do get the benefit of the doubt. I thought it was actually good on the refs to let a lot of this stuff go. But we have seen in playoffs before. The first game they let a lot of stuff go, and then they started batting down the hatches, right? So it'll be interesting to see what it'll be interesting to see what how the Jets come out in the next game, how much more aggressive they will be, and I think as long as what they do is it limit 1 or 2 power plays a night. I think they have the penalty kill that can do that. I think when you get into the 4 or 5 attempts against, now you're just playing with fire, right? And the Jets, as we know, then this essentially was a 2-1 game, a 2-1 win. Obviously, you get a couple empty netters, but this game was kind of on a knife edge. It was a little bit of a white knuckle ride for a little bit in that third period, and the Jets had to figure out a way to, in the second, to manufacture a game-tying goal, which they were able to do. But I don't think there's a lot here where the Jets. There's just not a lot of leeway for the Jets in terms of the game that they have to play to win, and starting to give up more penalties because you're more aggressive. I'm just not sure I agree with Paul Maurice on that, but that's just my opinion on it.
I want to get into talking about Paul Maurice here because to me, this was the storyline tonight that I was most impressed by. Going down the stretch while the Jets were struggling, having problems, Paul Maurice, at some point you wonder, are they just saying all the right things or are they getting through? Are they getting somewhere? Paul Maurice had said the team was starting to turn things around even when they were losing. Then they started winning, and we were saying they're winning against teams where it doesn't really matter, and I still do agree with that. But I take a look at what Paul Maurice said down the stretch here. He said this team in the playoffs, the off-the-rush scoring is going to disappear. I thought when he said it that was a clear shot at the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid and kind of building up in his team. Listen, the way Connor McDavid scores in the regular season, that doesn't fly in the postseason. It's just not going to happen. Well, it didn't really happen tonight, did it? He said about his team, we're going to need to get to the front of the net if we're going to create some more scoring, something I thought the Jets had been terrible at this year. Well, what happens tonight? Pullman gets a goal in tight. Dominic Toninato gets a tip in tight. That game looked exactly like what Paul Maurice said that game was going to look like. And to me, that means he's got a vision. He puts that vision out there. He lays out the steps for his team to follow that vision, and the Jets followed it absolutely to a T. I tried to get Blake Wheeler to talk about it. He didn't want to say anything about it. My take on that is they don't want to sound like they've arrived, like they have a blueprint, they figured it out and it's done. Smart of him not to do that. But what about the job that Paul Maurice did to get this team ready to play that style of game coming out of what they came out of? Start with you, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see, and we said this off the top of the show, I mean, yes, they played a style of game that helped them win. I also think there was elements of that game that also could have led to a bit of I don't want to say another 6-1 loss, but a loss on the other way around, right? I mean, I think that when you're giving up 2-to-1, ratio in terms of scoring chances against, there is, you're playing against two of the highest scoring guys in the league. I mean, you have to, you're not going to hold those guys off the score sheet, right? And we talked about this a little bit, Sean, on the Leo Curve show before. Yes, I agree that the top line did what they needed to do defensively. I don't think that you can also expect them to not do it offensively and still get through this series, right? And I know you kind of disagree a bit on that. I think the blueprint is there for that top line. They were able to manage McDavid tonight, and that's great, and especially doing that when you don't have, the line chain options that you do at home. But I think that, Mark Scheifele still needs to put that puck in the back of the net on the 3-on-1 there at the end of the first period. I mean, I think they need that still. So we'll see. I mean, everybody's going to talk, okay, they got some points on the empty net. I mean, those, obviously those are important, especially in this game, right? Because that 3-1 goal by Kyle Connor completely changes the complexion of how the rest of the game is going to go. But I still think that top line needs to be offensive as well and go from there. Man, this Ellen, she hates me. Jeez Louise. Anyways,
don't let it faze you, Scott.
No, it's all good. But anyways, yeah, I think I just think that, and Paul Maurice alluded to it again. Like we said off the top of the show, Paul Maurice knows that this game was, he feels that they played a good game, but there is another level to take it to. There's things that they can clean up. I don't think I'm being negative here. I just think that the Jets didn't play a perfect game, as Kenney said too. But they played a game that was good enough to win tonight, and they got to do that 3 more times in this series to move on to play either Toronto or Montreal.
Yeah, I mean nobody's planning a parade, and I don't think that, again, it's not a perfect game by any stretch. But again, the Jets have to play low event hockey against the Oilers, and to a degree they were able to do that. I think, Scott, you touched on it. I think that, yes, the Jets top line did do a pretty adequate job against McDavid. I mean, compared to how it had gone previously, that's one of the best games they've played against McDavid. Now, having said that, I think that Mark Scheifele has a another level to reach. I think that there were a few times where I think I saw a little bit too much coast in his game in the defensive side of the puck. There were times where he definitely had some great chances generated. 3-on-1 rush, he buries that one. It's a different hockey game most likely, but at the same time, the fact that the Jets top line was able to generate a little bit more. Kyle Connor, again, outside of the one time where he probably should have shot when he tried to pass, I thought they were using their speed, and Wheeler did a great job of using that burst and getting it. So, Sean, what we talked about in the pregame, the Jets had not done a great job on the forecheck this year up until tonight. And again, they weren't dominant on the forecheck, but they were able to create some chaos on it because their speed got onto the defense of the Oilers pretty effectively, something they had not done earlier in the year. I mean, I don't think for 1 second the Jets think they're going to keep McDavid off the board for the remainder of the series, but they found a plan to minimize his ability to take over the game, which is what he had done. And back to what I had said before, I mean, there have been a few nights, I mean, it was early in the year, of course, but I mean, the Jets did a great job against McDavid for 16:55 in that game in Winnipeg where Yamamoto scores with 3:05, and then Draisaitl scores with 0.7 seconds left. So the template was there. They just didn't get it to the 60-minute mark. So as you mentioned, I mean, the empty net goal changes everything. To me, I think the Jets actually played better in the third than they did in the second. I mean, they really struggled. I mean, it was almost 10 minutes with one shot, and it was not a dangerous shot, and they were almost in their end the entire time. So, I mean, that's not part of the template, but at the same time, they did keep a lot of those shots to the outside at times. But it'll be, again, nobody on the Jets was celebrating very much tonight. I mean, I think that was a smart tack to take. I don't think they were going to infuriate their opponent. But what they did know is that unlike last year, when basically, almost the air was sucked out of the balloon in game one last year, a lot of it had to do with injuries, of course, but now the Jets have a good that good feeling that they said they had, what they said they had, and we weren't 100% sure about, was actually legitimate. And again, it only gets built further by a win in an actual game that matters. So, I mean, again, let's see what it means in the big picture. We expect the Oilers to be better in the next game, but we also agree that the Jets can play better. I mean, one other thing that I actually want to get to here, did not show up on the score sheet. Paul Stastny was excellent tonight, especially in his play on the defensive side of the puck. I thought he was very good and critical to get him going. And Matthew Perreault had his feet going. And the one other thing, too, we talk about young players making an impact. Christian Vesalainen did finally find a way to get that wrist shot off on several occasions. And again, that's why he's in the lineup. Again, we were a bit surprised by the decision at the time, but we saw it on display. It didn't translate into points immediately, but that's the most dangerous Christian Vesalainen has been in his 11 NHL games. And
he looked confident, right? Like
he did.
Confident,
skated well, got the shot off, looked for the shot. That's what we've been talking about. He looked like a guy that was trying to get on and off the ice without getting scored on. Today, he looked like a guy that was trying to go bar down. So, again, it didn't happen, but a couple of really good shots on goal, and he was dangerous. Yeah, I mean, maybe one of them was wide, but I really liked that early chance that he had, and he skated so well, and that was something that the Jets need. I know a few folks, we should get into it right away here. We don't know what the injury situation is. For me, I think there is a possibility that Nikolai Ehlers plays in Game 2. Is it possible now that they wait until Game 3 because they already won one on the road, or does that maybe put the impetus to get them back with 2 more days of rest to try and get it to a 2-0 stranglehold, for lack of a better term? I think we will see Nikolai Ehlers in Game 2, but I think it's more likely we won't see Dubois until Game 3. That's my personal opinion. I don't know this, but that is what my gut feeling would suggest. However, classic Ken Wiebe fashion, I will couch this by saying because the Jets won the opener, it's entirely possible they wait in Game 3 with Ehlers because they have a little bit more wiggle room. But again, I also think that they'll try, if he can play. The one thing, we haven't seen him take a slap shot yet. We've seen him skate incredibly well. His wrist shot has added velocity every single day he's on the ice. I think he could play in Game 2, but again, I'm not going to try to suggest it's a lead pipe lock, but he could play in Game 2. I don't expect Dubois before Game 3.
And one thing just on Christian Vesalainen, How much do you think that his confidence or just his ability to play was because he was playing on the right side, and he's played that in the Moose, right?
Not a lot.
They had him on that. Well, I thought that he played a lot of right wing in the Moose. Didn't Pascal talk about that? Even on your show? No, maybe not.
No, maybe more this year. But in the past, he had not been overly comfortable on the right side.
Okay, yeah, he looked fine there. So, anyways, yeah.
Ken, I wanted to talk to you about balance with that line because I know you touched on it. The thing about both you guys, you give a lot of different directions we can go into. So I'm going to go back a little bit into this. But the idea of that first line, we talked a little bit about it on the IC show before we came here. I actually really thought that the game that we saw from that top line was exactly what we needed to see from them. There was a couple opportunities that they had that were dangerous. I think specifically about that 3-on-2 where Wheeler passed it across to Scheifele. He has the open net and just misses that net. But I'm wondering about the idea of Paul Maurice kind of having to keep that line from its worst instincts of getting in and playing Harlem Globetrotter hockey with the puck, which they seem to get sucked into every once in a while, and trying to keep them focused on the defensive side of things. I thought the way that the game was as tight as it was, the success that they'd had in kind of slowing down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, although that will mostly go to Adam Lowry, there was no reason for them to up their risk profile. And yeah, they come out and they get their, the third and the fourth goals, and it's the empty net goals against, or again for the guys who always seem to get the empty net goals. But I thought that if they go back into that dressing room, Paul Maurice is going to look at those guys and say, yeah, there were a couple of moments you weren't in the right spot here, right spot there. But I think what we saw from that line tonight is exactly what Paul Maurice wants to see from that line.
No, again, don't get me wrong. I think that they were very good. I just think that I just found there were a few occasions where the puck management was a little bit suspect, if you will. And again, I think that Scheifele had a decent game, but I think if you want to go head-to-head with McDavid, yes, they held him off the board, which is incredibly difficult to do, and then adding the offense is a bonus. And hey, let's not forget Blake Wheeler had an assist on the first goal. But I just thought that there were a few occasions where I don't want to say tentative, but Mark looked like he wasn't moving his feet at certain times when I thought he should have been. And there were a couple of times where with the puck, he was a little bit too casual, and those are the type of plays that in the regular season had ended up in the back of the net. I think that the job those guys did was a diligent job, an important job, and I thought that the wingers were really driving in terms of the forecheck. And again, Scheifele created some really nice opportunities. His wrist shot was on point today. And I think that if he keeps getting chances of that variety, he's going to score and make a big impact on the series. But that line already made an impact in this game by the job that they did. They did the job that so many people have said countless times that they cannot do. Going head-to-head with McDavid, yes, McDavid's line took them to the cleaners in the regular season, but they did a pretty good job of limiting the opportunities against that line. Yes, Puljujarvi scored the goal. And again, that was a rare play where Dylan DeMello got knocked off the puck by Dominic Cahoon. That sort of started that whole sequence. But what I really liked, and what most people didn't see probably, DeMello knew that he made a mistake. What he did immediately after the goal, banged Hellebuyck on the pads and basically said, that's my bad, and it's not going to happen again. And that's exactly what happened. That's what you like to see from a veteran player. He knew he made a mistake, he owned the mistake, and he told his goalie, hey, next time that's not going to happen. You can count on me. And that's what you'd like to see from teams. Those are the type of things we talked, Sean, about earlier, and Scott, you as well, about, team togetherness. That's an example of team togetherness. The one time that the Jets teammates were unable to pick up Dylan DeMello after that error, he knew, he owned it. He went to Hellebuyck and said, hey, there we go. This isn't going to happen. And that's how he played afterwards. So I just think that was one of those little subtle kind of things that can be a small thing that ends up being a big thing. And that pairing was very good tonight.
Here's a question I want to tackle here. Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge says, who was the best line defensively tonight? If you're Pomo, which line do you match up versus McDavid in Game 3? I thought there was, we saw quite a few instances of the fourth line going out against McDavid. They really kind of were doing the team effort here, but who did you think matched best defensively against him tonight?
I think the top line did a nice job, but again, we'll see what happens from there. I think you're going to see Lowry against them a bit too. But
yeah, I mean, I think. I think the top line played well against them. I mean, I don't think the analytics will show that. That doesn't matter. I mean, to me, at the end of the day, they kept him off the score sheet, right? I think Paul Maurice will also send Adam Lowry's line out there if there are signs of struggle, right? Like there isn't. I thought Adam Lowry's line was probably the best defensive line on the ice tonight. I mean, you can make a case for the fourth line, but the minutes, are there's a wide variety of the minutes, right? And to be honest, I mean, Adam Lowry's line is again kind of that second line, right? I mean, they are second over the boards. They are that second line. I mean, I know that's not how it looks on the game sheets, but the way that Paul Maurice plays them, they are the second line in that sense. So, I think it's a combo, to use a Kenney phrase, a combo platter, right? I mean, I think you need both those lines having the ability to do it against either one of Draisaitl's line or McDavid's line. And at the end of the day, if you can get them working, no matter who it is they're playing against, it doesn't matter if it's a Scheifele line against Draisaitl or Lowry against McDavid. As long as one's working, it's fine. It worked out tonight. Both those guys were off the score sheet, and I think that's what matters, right? I don't think when the Jets come out of this series, if they do, the analytics are going to look good because you're playing against two players that are unbelievably talented and are going to get their chances. I mean, if you look at the high danger shots tonight, there were several from McDavid, right? I mean, it's just they weren't of the the very high danger variety in terms of that. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck had them smothered, right? So I think that in the end of the day, they just need one of those lines. Not one of those lines. They need both of those lines to work against the other two lines, and that's just kind of how it has to be in this series. And then grind out the goals like they did tonight.
And the other thing too. Just one quick thing. The other thing about that Lowry line is that their ability to create zone time as well and make McDavid defend. And that's the other part. Jets top line using their speed, that was important in the game as well. That's why they were able to keep the high danger chances down in terms of that top line, even though, yes, they were able to generate.
Guys, the Jets didn't talk about it too much, nor did Paul Maurice, and I guess not, because I do think specifically they were really in full mode trying not to create, locker room chalkboard material, right? We touched on it. Blake Wheeler's answer seems to be, guys, we haven't accomplished anything yet. We haven't arrived yet. We haven't crafted out a blueprint that is beating these guys. But I want to get your thoughts on what it is specifically that you think the Jets did well to shut McDavid down. Because here we were talking before the game and in the playoff preview about, hey, everyone says, hey, get in this guy's kitchen, hit him, go to shadow him all over the ice, all these kind of things. And we say, well, it's not that easy to do because he's so fast. So one, you got to find a guy who can keep up with him. And two, if you want to hit him, you got to be able to catch him. I thought the Jets did a really good job of that tonight. How'd they do it, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, using their speed for one thing, and they didn't feed the transition game, which is what you and I have talked about in our pregame hits. The Jets were pretty good in terms of puck protection. I mean, there was the odd turnover. Yes, those are going to happen. Those guys' speed is going to create and generate. But for the most part, there were no bad turnovers at either blue line. They did not give up a ton of odd man rushes in the game. And the other part, too, is, I mean, they made those guys defend, which is not their strength. I mean, no offense to them. Puljujärvi, again, I thought he was effective. Big, strong body along the wall. I mean, Cahoon's not a great defensive player. So you have to make those guys play in their own end. Make them go the whole 200 feet without giving up, bad turnover. There were not dangerous plays. There were not pucks in shin pads. Scott, as you mentioned, I mean, Stanley, one time, instead of pounding it right away, he made a nice little shake and bake and then got it down low. Just really smart. The Jets played a smart game. Again, some people, is that enough shots on goal to win a series? Probably not. But the Jets can't get into a run-and-gun game, and one way to do that is to play kind of more of that grinding style, the physical style, and make the Oilers defend, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to minimize their offensive talents.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think just to add to that, I mean, I think Neil Pionk, and we talked about this a little bit, I think he made a big impact on that. Because he was, I think the defense need to also be kind of credited here. I thought Neil Pionk did very well against that line. I thought Neil Pionk played McDavid hard. I thought Neil Pionk was on the right side of Connor McDavid on a lot of these plays. And so when that happens, I mean, you're not allowing him to get into those lanes, right? And then he was doing those little things too, that were, that allowed them to sort of, just contain him, right? I mean, you got to stick on him. You got a little bit of a body. These are hard things to do against a player like that, but they managed to figure out a way to do it. And I thought it was a 5-man effort, all around to try and stop him. But the game wasn't also just completely predicated on that either, right? Like, they were able to do other things to, generate their goals or whatever. They took advantage of opportunities. So there was a balance there of ensuring that they, kept him in check enough, and also trying to, I guess, play their own game to try and, eke out a victory. And they did that.
Guys, you know what I don't think we've talked about nearly enough down the stretch here, as the Jets were kind of faltering and they were trying to kind of pick themselves up by their bootstraps, was the play of Blake Wheeler down the stretch. And I think coming into this game, what was it? I think he had 11 points in 7 games, or no, I think he had 11 points after in 6 and 2 periods or something like that before tonight. I don't know. He's somewhere around, I think,
points in 8 of 9.
Points in 8 of 9. Okay. I mean, I thought what we saw here tonight, he sets up that first goal, shows up when it's time to show up, when they needed the empty netters. But let's talk a little bit about his leadership and what you think he's meant to this team as they needed to kind of dig themselves out of a hole, and that he's showing up at the right time of year.
Yeah, I mean, look up and all of a sudden, after, some folks getting all over Blake Wheeler, I mean, there were some rough patches for sure. We know some of it was injury related, but you look up at the end of the year, he's almost a point-a-game player. Sure, some of that was on the power play, but you don't penalize a guy for his ability to distribute the puck. And again, the Jets' power play went 2 for 30 at the end of the year, so he wasn't piling up his points on the power play. He was getting the bulk of them at 5-on-5, and that's because he found his speed. And again, he takes things personally, and he fuels himself the way that he does, but he delivered. I mean, that's the other part. He went out and delivered at a time when the Jets needed him to, and this is a guy who's motivated to win a title. I mean, points aren't that important to him, but he also knows the Jets rely on him to produce, so that is a big part of his job, and he has been able to do that. Mostly because, like I said, I think he's got his speed game going once again. And again, yeah, I know it was an empty net goal, but the burst is back with Blake Wheeler, and that's a big part of his game. So he needs to continue to do that. The Jets need their top line to be absolutely excellent, and they were solid tonight for sure. They got rewarded, and they delivered what they needed to do. And you're right, Blake Wheeler's leadership has been talked about a lot, but he also kept a very calm demeanor at a time when things seemed to be unraveling emotionally, and the Jets were showing some of the toll that losing streak was taking. Blake was quick. Yes, there were some days where he was still salty, but for the most part, he was the picture of calm, although he also allowed himself to admit it was the most adverse situation he'd gone through in his entire career. So, being kind of vulnerable or showing those emotions that aren't only anger, I think that was important for him. I think he was being honest in a year where things have been difficult for a lot of people at a lot of levels. He was very honest, but his play was back to leading by example, and the Jets need that in order to have success in a playoff series. Yeah,
I just think Blake Wheeler's healthy, right? I mean, there was a good chunk of that season where he wasn't healthy, and we kind of figured that out later in the season. I mean, you're playing with cracked ribs, I get that. I also think Blake Wheeler knows that the clock is ticking on him, right? If Blake Wheeler doesn't show up, a lot of other guys aren't going to do the same thing either, right? So I think that Blake does have the ear of that room, or at least a good enough chunk of it, that he's got to show up and he's got to figure it out. I mean, he's not getting any younger. Me and Blake are the same age. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. I just want to make sure I have a job in the morning. But no, I think he's back. I don't want to say he's back to like the power forward we saw in his 91-point seasons, but the burst, like Kenney said, is there. And, that's important, because I thought Blake Wheeler, there was a couple pucks tonight where Blake Wheeler was on the forecheck and getting in there and using his body. And I think you need that out of Blake Wheeler, right? He is a big guy. He's 6'5", 200 and some odd pounds. And he can do that. He can separate a guy from the puck. And that's what he's good at. And I think if he's doing that, I think he also keeps some of his line mates in check too, in terms of that defensive side of the game. I think those guys follow Blake Wheeler in that way. If Blake Wheeler is playing that way, then they're going to do that. And I thought we saw that, minus for a couple of things from maybe Mark Scheifele tonight. But I thought Blake did a good job tonight. I not really any, especially on that goal. I mean, Kevin Bieksa said it during the Sportsnet during the second intermission. I mean, Blake Wheeler cuts into the middle. It stifles the two defenders. We talked about this earlier. I mean, that's just a good heads-up play by Blake Wheeler that Kevin Bieksa, a veteran of this league, picked up on, and it led to a goal. So, smart move by Blake, obviously a veteran himself, and it creates the game-tying goal at the time the Jets really needed it.
Guys, I remember I went to go cover Patrick Laine overseas before the World Cup, and took a detour to cover a Russia-Czech game, and Thomas Plekanec was getting interviewed there, and one of the local Czech media had asked him, that question about, like, how much longer do you think you have? And you could tell it was the first time he'd faced that question, right? The clock's ticking, you're getting older kind of question. Freezer asked something similar to Wheeler earlier today, and it was the first time that question came up with him. And I remember right off the bat, my ears kind of perked up, because you always wonder how a player is going to respond, because eventually those questions are coming. That, in my opinion, is the first time we've ever heard Wheeler faced with one of those questions. I thought, Blake, who can be very prickly and who can lash out if he doesn't like what's being asked, you could tell he was taken aback a little bit by the question. I thought he handled it well, though. I guess the one thing that we got to say is, when the playoffs are on, everyone's watching. You know what I mean? Everyone across the hockey world is watching. So he handled it really well. I just thought that was a funny situation that it popped up, because I thought that one had potential for a big explosion. Blake handled it well, though. Energy 21 had asked earlier on how many games for the Kadri hit. Did you guys see that?
I didn't see it. I was writing.
You didn't see it?
Say that again?
For the Kadri hit, he was given a match penalty, taken out of the game. It was, you're going back to the Mike Richards
again with Nazem, right?
It is straight on headshot, catches him not looking. It's terrible. I'll answer the question for what I'm seeing. I honestly would be surprised if we see him in this series again against the St. Louis Blues. And I guess they went up 2-0. So that's maybe not saying a lot. But if that series goes to 7 games, I don't think you're seeing him in there. I think it's 5. Are you seeing it now, Scotty?
Yeah, Mike. This is a typical Nazem Kadri in the playoffs, man.
Well, exactly.
He does this thing.
It's funny. Hey, credit to the crew who was calling that game. They touched on him. It was a situation he'd run into time and time again in Toronto. And they said This is basically what had him run out of Toronto, or the reason why Toronto gave up on him. It is interesting to see him come back to that kind of play, because these are the kind of hits that we are trying to root out of the game. And because so many of them have been rooted out of the game, it just stands out that much more. But Scotty, you're thinking, how many games are you thinking?
Well, I think you're right. I think the problem is, I don't know how so he's a repeat offender, of course. I don't know when the last time he did it. I don't know. I believe it's 18 months you have to go without a thing, but you can also take into account past hits regardless. And this is the second time, not the second, this is the third time, right, in the playoffs that he's done something like this. I thought he did it 2 years in a row with the Leafs when they were playing the Bruins, I thought. But either way, I'm looking at the hit, and he lines them up open ice here. And it's straight to the head.
All the way. He sees
it coming. But the thing is, this is one of those hits, and I know that George Peros, and I know the league is not very good at consistency on this, but if you're looking at this and you're George Peros, and I'm just looking at it now, this is one of those hits where you just can't. You can avoid the contact that you made to the head because you have so much time to line up that hit that it doesn't have to be the head. You could have made that hit straight to the body, and there would have been no issue. It would have been a nice, clean hit, a la, the thing that we saw on Dylan DeMello tonight. Archibald laid a nice hit. Fans might be upset about that. It was a good hit, no head contact, anything like that, right? And Archibald lined him up perfectly, and Kadri did too, until he, shoved the elbow the shoulder, right into the face. Yeah, you just see it. Justin Falk's head just goes snap. Yeah, that's bad. 4 games, maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one because, I mean, this isn't the first time Kadri's done this, and especially in the playoffs. And have you heard any update on Falk? I mean, probably not a lot, but was he out of the game? Was he done, or did he return?
I mean, I can't imagine a concussion spotter allowing him back there.
Right.
I mean, it was fairly late in the game. Although, I mean, there would have been time to come back. I didn't see that far. But
and
Ken,
Falk was knocked out cold here, right? So
yeah. Did you have any thoughts on it, Ken?
Not really. I didn't see it, so
okay.
I'm not multitasking. We should get out. You got to get out of City TV there.
Well, we got 5 more minutes. Let's do 5 more minutes here because we have to talk about the third pair. I mean, we talked about it a little bit here, but like, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it a hunch by Paul Maurice, but we had wondered so long down the stretch what we were going to land on here. I thought that it was going to end up being Ben and Stanley. He goes with Poolman and Stanley, to your point, Ken. And I know we've talked about this a little bit, but just, I mean, who on their bingo card had the third pairing of defensemen being the 2 biggest difference makers in this game?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important thing. I mean, like I said, I talked about his mobility the other day. I mean, that's an important asset against a fast team like the Oilers. And the other part about Stanley, yes, he brings a physical side, but he's also a smart puck mover. And I mean, when you can combine those two things, and as Paul Maurice touched on, when Stanley's moving his feet, he's able to be more effective when it comes to doling out physical hits. So that was important in this game for sure. The third pairing, didn't get, exposed. I mean, they played a solid game because they can move their feet and they have some size. So, I mean, again, added offense is a complete bonus. I mean, like, look at this, going into the series, reading the game notes today, that the Jets have had almost zero offensive production from their defensemen. Yet Pionk has been an effective player, but I think it was 94.1% of the goals the Jets scored this year were by their forwards. So the fact that the Jets got a goal from a defenseman and the second play generated by a point shot is a massive boost for a team that was missing 2 of their top 6 forwards. So it was important for them to get some production from the back end without it being careless or reckless production, right? It's not joining the rush and then giving an odd man rush the way back. It was smart job of joining, an excellent entry, going to the net when the third F3 was high on that play. I mean, those are the things that you can do. So I thought that was an effective use of the third pairing. I think they did an excellent job. And again, I've said before the series, I wouldn't be shocked if all 8 defensemen for the Jets make an appearance in this series. I'm not saying that that's a guarantee, but it certainly would be a possibility. But there's absolutely zero reason for a change to be made on the back end, and I don't think we'll see one. But for if those guys continue to play that way, that theory that I had earlier about possibly seeing 6 or 8 or seeing 8 defensemen because of the back-to-back nature, it's just not necessary. Those guys are very effective. Poolman was great in the bubble last year in the third pairing. He will continue to play that type of role, and as long as Logan Stanley plays with confidence, he's in the lineup because of what he can do with the puck and adding that physical element. And I'm not including Niku's not in the top 8. He's the 9th defenseman.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, I don't know how you guys thought about Derek Forbort tonight. I didn't think it was his best game, but I also thought that, early on in the game, he created a chance off of, just early in the first period that got on goal. So I don't know. I think that the tendency of Paul Maurice will be to take a guy like Stanley out or a younger guy. I don't know if Stanley, I don't know if you can even take, Logan Stanley out at this point. I mean, here's a guy who's, I'm a fan of the game that he plays, so I don't know if you can take him out. I think Derek Forbort still needs to be the guy that's kind of on that block, and I just don't know if he had his best game tonight. But that would you might disagree, Ken. I'm not sure. I mean,
there were some issues for Forbort in the game for sure, but again, that's a tough assignment they have.
It's true. Yep.
Some folks are is Jordy Ben a better option right now? I just don't see that move being made. I mean, Paul Maurice, basically came out and said they need Derek Forbort in order to win. So they're going to stick with him, and he does a good job on the penalty kill. Where there's some issues at times at 5-on-5, yes, but I don't think it was a bad game. I just don't think it was his best. There's no doubt about that.
All right, guys, let's shut it down here. You are right. I'm going to get security that already hassled me a half hour ago, so we should get out of this. Really appreciate everyone staying around so late. I want to say a special thank you to the Illegal Curve boys who went way, way deep tonight, like $1.40 they did, or $1.50 for their show, trying to bridge the gap and allow Ken to do his thing. We really appreciate that. It's going to be like this for the next little while in the playoffs here, because Ken's writing it's great stuff, and they want to get it out to the masses as quickly as possible. So that's how we're going to be doing this. Waiters 27, you're right. Got to plug the Friday show. We've got Greg Millen and Craig Simpson coming up, my favorite analysts that I've worked with before. Got a lot of stuff to get in with them. Again, we love those shows. They're great. If you haven't checked out last week's with Todd Woodcroft and David Amber, you got to check that out. Todd Woodcroft, I just was thinking time and time again, kind of all the stuff that he said about how the Jets could do what they needed to do in the playoffs. And I just saw that's a guy who's been in that room before and knows the plan and knows what they were going to be executing. And I think we saw a good dose of that tonight. So if you want to go check that out and kind of get a little glimpse inside the room, that's a great way to do it, is to go check out that show. Other than that, everyone, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sticking with us. We hope you'll do so throughout the playoffs. We'll be here throughout the playoffs, probably jumping on with the Illegal Curve boys every now and again. But one last time, thank you so much. We will see you Friday morning, and then we will see you for the pregame on Friday, 45 minutes beforehand on Instagram, and right here for the postgame on Friday. Enjoy your time until Friday. Bye, everybody.